Hello everyone, my name is Fear Dragon, and welcome to another Modest Musings, where the name is not Modest Musings because my face is red and blushing, it's because my eyes are red, because I just woke up. Welcome guys. So today's topic is going to be about a little bit about Overwatch League, but I'm actually going to start off by talking a little bit about Shakespeare. So Shakespeare had a type of play or story called the tragedy. And a big part of the tragedy is that it would constantly be throwing these horrible, disheartening things at the protagonist, or the protagonist. Sometimes you kind of be rooting against the protagonist, but overall, it'd be these very, very depressing stories, as the name tragedy actually comes to mean now. But one very important aspect of it was that it was not purely horrible, disappointing things happening back to back to back to back. There was actually reprieve from it. There was breaks from it through comedy, through some sense of humor, through some good things happening. Not everything was bad. And that's a very important thing, because the idea that Shakespeare had was that if you have this tension that you're creating, then constantly just having tension created the entire time isn't actually the most effective way to draw out the most tension. The most effective way is to increase tension, increase tension, increase tension, relax a little bit so that the audience relaxes. They're not feeling as tense and shoulders hunched anymore. And then when they're relaxed again, they feel that sense of, things are maybe starting to turn around. That is when you kind of turn the ropes or, squeeze out the extra little bit and they tense up. And it's the act of tensing and relaxing that really makes that kind of story so gripping and so, I guess, engaging. It's not the fact that it's constantly this disappointing and disheartening thing. And I think that I bring that up because I think that that's very true in a lot of things, and not necessarily just with depressing stories, but also with a lot of excitement. It's the same reason that I think a lot of people who watch StarCraft and esports in general know, hey, yeah, there's a reason why commentators aren't just hype all the time, like everything, literally everything is the most exciting thing that could have possibly. You don't want that. You want breaks, you want ups and downs in the story, in the way that it's being told. And that's very important to know, because I feel like StarCraft really allows for that. It embodies a lot of that, because you have that kind of slow build up, the slow building of tension. You also have small bits of tension being created through these, I would call them like momentous events. That sounds much more dramatic than it really is, but it's things like the Oracle is making its way across the map, and you're wondering how much damage is it going to do. It's not necessarily going to end the game, but there's that potential to do substantial damage that will really change the way, the impact of how the game is going to be played for the rest of the time in a very serious way. There's all of these kinds of moments like that, of the first units engaging out in the map. Oh, an Overlord getting sniped off. Like, there are things that don't necessarily hold insane value. It's not necessarily everything is game ending, but there is some small degrees of tension created through these individual moments with relaxation period where nothing is happening. Even the most chaotic games oftentimes have at least momentary periods of respite. And even when they have those crazy games that 3 minutes of constant aggression and trading, it is an abnormality. Now, the thing about Overwatch League is that I don't really felt like it had a lot of that. It was game starts, and then it just felt like, and this comes from the perspective, just to give you guys context, my understanding of Overwatch is I know all the characters. I more or less know all the abilities, even if I don't know the numbers behind those abilities. I have a general sense of all the abilities. And I know character names. I know the basic ideas of the maps. I know what push the payload is. I know that, there are checkpoints and whatnot. I know that there's the timer and that the timer increases whenever a checkpoint is hit, but I don't know how much by all these kinds of random small details. But I have a general good sense of how Overwatch works as a game overall. I don't know the specific numbers, or I don't know the meta. I don't know much about any of the players, etc. So when I'm watching this Overwatch League that premiered, the preseason, by the way, started yesterday, and a lot of anticipation has been around this event. But there's also been a lot of concern about, oh, is Overwatch watchable? And I think the biggest thing that it lacked was if you don't necessarily follow the esport that well or closely, it's very difficult to get a sense of tension that is meaningful throughout the match. I maybe felt a little bit of tension for the first minute or so, but then I realized it's just a game of Overwatch, and the fighting is just always there. It's always there constantly. And none of it felt really meaningful. No time where I saw like, oh, this player died. Therefore, or like these two players died. Therefore, that means that such and such thing happens. Like I never knew what any of those deaths meant or what any of the progress meant. I never had a good sense when the push the payload thing was happening who was winning at any given moment. Unless the commentators were explicitly calling it out, I didn't know whether someone was on par for pushing the payload before the time ran out, or if there's a certain part of the map that's harder or easier. Like, I have no senses of all of this, and I don't really know that that was all communicated very well. Not necessarily because the commentators were doing a really poor job, but it felt like the commentators weren't catering to that newer audience. This sort of becomes important when Overwatch League has as much of an investment as it does. And I feel like it needs to cater a little bit more toward that kind of newer audience. The people who maybe play Overwatch casually, maybe have a little bit of interest in it. I would even say actually play probably more than I do, but would want to have some idea conveyed to them in how the esports world of Overwatch works, because it's not necessarily always going to be the same. Those expectations are not necessarily going to be the same. And I feel like that's what it was lacking, and that can be imparted a little bit through commentary. It can be imparted a little bit through the UI if they find better ways to represent the game. Oftentimes, StarCraft 2 is very nice because more often than not always true, but very often, supply tells the tale. Look at the supply, as Todd always likes to say. And that is a very actually important metric that I think sometimes get underestimated for new players, is that, yeah, having literally two numbers you can compare against and say, oh, this number is bigger than the other. And I think that's why the capture the point matches were a little bit more engaging in some ways, because there's something meaningful going on. Some team is capturing the point. There's a sense of urgency, but there's never any relief of the tension. And I think that is a little bit of a problem. And I think that having a better or conveying a better understanding of who is winning, what is going on, what these individual little battles are actually mean, I think that will help out Overwatch League a lot. And of course, this is the preseason, so this is the time to experiment, to figure things out. Now, granted, Overwatch has been kind of broadcasted for a while now, so I am sure that a lot of people already understand many of these problems, but from my perspective, this is the number one problem to me for Overwatch League. They've actually done a great job. I know people who literally, I had a coworker come up to me asking me what I was watching after like 5 o'clock because I turned on Overwatch League the preseason. And they said, oh, like, what's going on? Who are the San Francisco Shock? Because we live in San Francisco. He's like, oh, okay, well, cool. Like, I'm rooting for the San Francisco Shock because I'm from San Francisco. Like, that has a lot of power. There's a lot of these ways they've already engaged newer people, but they need to keep them engaged by giving a good sense of what's going on in the game. And right now, it's very difficult if you are not at a extreme level of knowledge in Overwatch to follow the game or to feel any sense of tension outside of the last 45 seconds. Nothing really feels incredibly impactful outside of like very extreme events that are kind of rare, like someone ultied with one of their like heroes like Diva or, you know, Reaper or something, and killed 5 people out of 6 on the team. Like, that's a very rare event in like high level play. I mean, that'd be the equivalent of saying someone move command. I mean, okay, not exactly the same, but similar vein of like how often it happens that some like a pro player move commands their army into their opponent. Like, it happens for sure. Probably happens like once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks in pro matches or semi-pro matches, but that's like across all of the tournaments. It's really, really not common. So I think that those kinds of things can help, and conveying the importance of those is very important, but finding other ways to represent the game that can be broken down into simpler terms, I think is going to be really important. Anyways, that's kind of the topic for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and yeah, we're going to be streaming a lot more StarCraft and just laddering and stuff. Also, Ladder Heroes will be scheduled sometime later in this month. I'm still trying to figure out some dates. Seems likely that might be around the 16th or 17th or something, but time will tell. But yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. I have a Discord if you guys are interested in discussing things with me, including the topics of these modest musings. And I will see you guys next time. Cheers.